April the 9th, 2019, Bowden, Greater Manchester. The morning erupts with a splinter of wood and a rush of boots. It's a raid. Inside, lights blaze on as officers surge through the rooms. A man moves quickly, clutching something small, metallic, fragile. In the bathroom, glass shatters, water churns, fragments disappear into the bowl. From behind a locked door comes a single, desperate line: "Don't tell them anything." What follows will take years to unravel, because this raid is only the end of a much longer story of Aram Sheibani, one of the most notorious drug lords in modern British history. To understand how a man could wake in a Manchester flat with vault keys, hidden cash, and devices worth destroying, the lens must shift backwards. 2 decades earlier, Aram Sheibani arrived in Britain as a refugee. By 19, he holds the deed to a house in Hulme. What follows is not success in the ordinary sense, but the quiet construction of a fortune that paper records cannot truly explain. Sheibani is born in Iran in 1980. He arrives in Britain as a refugee, eventually settling in Greater Manchester. By 19, he signs the papers for a house in Hulme. A first property goes on to evolve into a portfolio. Manchester, London, then Spain. On paper, he is a landlord and developer, complete with a registered company and formal title. In reality, the numbers never add up. Between 1999 and 2010, he declares income only 5 times, each return bolstered with forged documents. Payslips, tax forms, bank statements, manufactured to inflate earnings and unlock mortgages. With false records, he buys, remortgages, and sells in rapid cycles. Associates act as straw buyers, transferring deeds into his hands without payment. By deceiving banks about his income and occupation, Sheibani assembles a £5 million property empire without legitimate support. Investigators later conclude more than £3 million in income was never declared to HMRC. Tax evasion on a vast scale, hidden in bricks and mortar. For years, Sheibani moved in the shadows, stacking millions, bending the system, and convincing the world he was untouchable. But no illusion lasts forever, and in his case, it all began with one moment of carelessness. The speed of accumulation draws attention. In 2011, he is stopped at Manchester Airport with €42,000 in cash. A first crack in the façade, and a signal to investigators that his wealth outpaces any honest means. For nearly a decade he stays ahead. Property deals, remortgages, international transfers, a lattice designed to mask origins. Outwardly, a shrewd businessman with a taste for success. Behind the screen, the foundations of something far darker take shape. Wealth without origin fuels spectacle. Sheibani moves through airports in first-class cabins, champagne in hand. He posts the images online. Yachts under Mediterranean sun, nights in velvet-lit clubs, women posed at his side. Social media becomes his stage, each photograph a curated mask of legitimacy. The garage alone could pass for an exhibition. 2 Bentleys, a Porsche Panamera, a Mercedes with gull-wing doors. One white Bentley paid for in cash becomes the centerpiece, gleaming like a trophy of excess. And, of course, indulgence doesn't stop with automobiles. Between 2011 and 2014, Sheibani pours 6 figures into sculpting himself. Hair transplants in Los Angeles, veneers, a nose job. Newspapers would one day call him vain, but the numbers are enough. $58,000 on a single procedure, more on the next, until even his reflection seemed purchased. His walls carry the same signal. Original works by Banksy and Warhol hang in his apartments, art worth hundreds of thousands. Hotels, yachts, island villas, Sheibani moved between them like they were his own. He hosted nights where champagne flowed endlessly, music drowned out the dawn, and pleasure blurred into decadence. In one Kensington apartment, valued at over £1.7 million, the parties stretched on for days, whispered about in the city as hedonistic marathons of drugs, luxury few could ever imagine. To friends and acquaintances he is untouchable, a crypto-millionaire, a property tycoon, a man whose success seemed effortless. To those who glimpsed his world, he embodied the fantasy, the trappings of wealth, the sheen of power, and a life that looked unstoppable. This extravagant show of immeasurable wealth went on for years. Designer clothes, curated posts, art and cars, and cosmetic perfection. By the 2010s, Sheibani has outgrown the role of a fraudster. His network now stretches into the upper echelons of the criminal world, and ambition drives him further. Connections open doors leading to some of the largest narcotics organizations in South America, and greed pushes him through. He wasn't chasing street-level profits. He wanted the source, and he got it. Driven by an insatiable hunger to expand his empire, Sheibani stepped into cartel circles where business was always mixed with pleasure. From that moment, his role shifted. No longer just a schemer in the property market, but a player in one of the most violent trades on earth. By at least 2010, cocaine became the cornerstone of his fortune. Evidence shows he had moved dangerously close to production itself, embedding himself near the source in Colombia. These weren't distant supply deals, they were handshakes with the men who controlled the flow of powder across oceans. One trip in December 2013 captures this transformation. Officially, a holiday in Colombia. Unofficially, something else entirely. Days of extravagant partying fold seamlessly into introductions with suppliers. And yet, for a man who photographs everything, every night out, every luxury escape, Colombia leaves no trace. No selfies, no albums, no digital footprint at all. Detectives would later seize on that silence. The absence itself became evidence. These were not vacations. They were business meetings in the cradle of cocaine production. From those ties, Sheibani forged direct links to cartel power. Supply chains opened across continents, pipelines of cocaine flowing into Europe. But he was never content with brokering alone. He sought control. He sought scale. He became not just a distributor, but a processor, manufacturing and moving the product at industrial level. Financial records and witness accounts confirm that between 2014 and 2016, he acquires heavy industrial machinery designed for coke processing. 2 hydraulic presses, each weighing 30 tons, capable of compressing powder into transport bricks. Industrial vacuum packaging machines to seal consignments. Large quantities of acetone, the chemical used in purification. On their own, each purchase could be explained away. Taken together, they are unmistakable. The presses themselves are never recovered. Investigators suspect that once law enforcement pressure mounted, Sheibani either hid or destroyed them. The timing coincides with global crackdowns on encrypted communications. Around him, the infrastructure multiplies. 11 professional-grade banknote counters circulate through his properties. No legitimate business needs such volume. They point directly to the scale of cash handled in narcotics deals. Through these assets, Sheibani positions himself as a wholesale broker and launderer. His networks funnel coke into Britain, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands and beyond. He supplies organised crime groups across the continent. In the UK, he operates at a distance, hidden behind property portfolios and shell companies. But his role is central. converting raw paste into saleable form, moving wholesale quantities across borders and feeding the European market. The proceeds return through familiar channels: properties, artwork, and cryptocurrency. By the time of his arrest, Sheibani controlled at least £1.5 million in crypto assets. He meticulously stores recovery codes for his wallets, knowing that digital currency is harder to trace and seize. Funds move through overseas exchanges designed to vanish from regulators' view. Communication is handled with the same caution. Sheibani uses EncroChat phones, modified smartphones built for black market trade with military-grade encryption. He holds multiple devices, each under a pseudonymous username. EncroChat is eventually compromised by law enforcement in 2020, exposing networks across Europe. But by then, Sheibani is already in custody. His devices are linked, his messages likely included, but the arrests have overtaken the evidence. Alongside these phones, he keeps iron key USB drives. These flash devices are built to self-wipe after repeated incorrect password attempts. To this day, whatever information they held remains sealed. But how does a man who builds walls so high, who masks his empire in luxury and deception, end up within reach of the very system he outsmarted for years? How does someone untouchable finally get touched? By the mid-2010s, the glossy exterior Sheibani had built for himself began to show fractures. Between 2016 and 2018, several investigative threads were slowly converging on his empire. His world of yachts, Bentleys and designer apartments was still being flaunted, but behind the scenes, law enforcement had begun to pick up his scent. The first alarms came not from coke, but from cash. Financial irregularities caught the attention of Greater Manchester Police's Economic Crime Unit. They noted large, unexplained deposits into his accounts, suspicious overseas transfers, and mortgage applications riddled with forgeries. Detectives were struck by how Sheibani's outward lifestyle, luxury homes, flashy cars, and frequent international travel, bore no resemblance to his financial disclosures. On tax filings, he would often declare no income at all, or minimal sums, while living like a multi-millionaire. The earlier incident at Manchester Airport, where he was stopped carrying €42,000 in undeclared cash, had already raised eyebrows. Now, combined with fraudulent mortgage documentation, it placed him firmly on the radar of financial crime investigators. At first, the scope of his criminality was unclear. Detectives believed they were dealing with a mortgage fraudster and money launderer, someone gaming the property market for illicit gain. But even they had no idea that this was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. Investigators mapped out Sheibani's property dealings and found repeated red flags for laundering. Homes would be purchased, flipped, and transferred with suspicious speed. In several cases, the initial buyers were associates, straw buyers, who would then pass the properties to Sheibani without any money ever changing hands. On paper, it looked like harmless real estate activity. In reality, it was the classic laundering method of cycling dirty cash through bricks and mortar until it looked clean. The deeper the Economic Crime Unit dug, the wider the net spread. By 2018, detectives realized they were not dealing with a small-time fraudster. They had stumbled onto a far more dangerous figure, an international narco-financier whose tentacles reached across multiple continents. Investigations began branching into Spain, Switzerland, Dubai, Australia, the United States, Colombia, and even Iran. Each new country added a layer of intrigue. Swiss bank accounts hinted at hidden reserves. Luxury purchases in Dubai pointed to money being stashed in the Middle East. Australian associates raised questions about global connections. Even Colombia, the beating heart of the coke trade, appeared in the puzzle. Detective Sergeant Lucy Pearson later described the moment of realization. It soon became clear that this reached far and wide and would require a dedicated team to unpick the sophisticated way he went about his criminal endeavors. Sheibani was not only laundering vast sums, he was embedding himself in global markets and networks, using financial sophistication to mask criminal roots. By early 2019, the net was tightening. Authorities had begun tying the financial irregularities directly to the narcotics trade. A critical breakthrough came when forensic accounting linked Sheibani's purchase of industrial coke processing equipment, hydraulic presses, vacuum packaging machines, and large quantities of acetone to his financial dealings. This was no longer suspicion, it was evidence. Surveillance teams also reported damning intelligence. Sheibani appeared actively involved in a coke deal within the UK. Investigators suspected he had stockpiles of controlled substances, or at the very least drug paraphernalia hidden at his properties. By then, the walls were closing in. The arrests of those around him rattled his calm façade, pushing him into a spiral of panic, and in trying to shield himself, he only drew more suspicion. He began offloading assets, moving money, dismantling pieces of the empire he had so carefully built. For investigators, that was the clearest signal yet. Something big was about to happen. He was moving money and selling assets. He might also be preparing to flee or destroy evidence. The decision was made. A multi-agency operation would bring his empire crashing down. The plan was carefully orchestrated. Simultaneous raids on his most important properties, ensuring he had no chance to tip off Confederates or move contraband between addresses. The operation built towards what investigators dubbed Strike Day. Tuesday, April the 9th, 2019. At dawn, the trap was sprung. Greater Manchester Police coordinated with the Metropolitan Police in London to hit both fronts at once. One team stormed his primary residence in Bowden Trafford, a wealthy enclave in Greater Manchester where Sheibani lived in opulence. Another team targeted his £1.74 million Kensington apartment in London, the so-called bachelor pad kitted out like a high-end designer store. The simultaneous raids marked the culmination of years of work, financial sleuthing, international inquiries, and patient surveillance. It was the moment where the facade of legitimacy would be stripped away and a darker reality behind Sheibani's empire revealed. For nearly 2 decades, Aram Sheibani had outwitted investigators, a chameleon blending fraud with glamour, crime with respectability. But shadows can only hide a man for so long. When the knock finally came on his door, it wasn't opportunity calling. It was the sound of his empire collapsing. The door was in Bowden. It was just after dawn in Bowden, the kind of leafy, affluent suburb where doors are meant to stay locked and nothing ever happens. But that morning on Delamere Road, everything changed. Sheibani was asleep in his luxury apartment, a plush hideaway shared with his girlfriend. The calm of the morning was broken by the pounding of fists and the bark of police outside. He refused to answer. Behind the silence, panic took hold. In those frantic minutes, Sheibani scrambled. He knew what was coming. He dashed to the bathroom, clutching the black devices that carried his empire's secrets. Encrypted phones, one of them an EncroChat handset. Expensive, custom-built, designed for criminals. He snapped it in half, submerged it in the toilet and tried to flush it away. Another lay smashed, bent out of shape, useless but damning. It was desperation, not control. When officers finally broke through, forcing the communal door, then battering their way into his flat, the chaos was laid bare. Sheibani was handcuffed, restrained, shouting at his girlfriend even as police dragged him away. "Don't tell them anything. Go no comment." His first instinct wasn't remorse, it was silence, obstruction. Then came the search. Inside a heavy safe, investigators found stacks of banknotes, more than £160,000 in cash crammed into bundles. Alongside it, slips of paper with carefully written cryptocurrency recovery codes, the keys to digital fortunes. Small bags of coke tucked in with the money. Keys to safety deposit boxes hidden in vaults across the city. Parked outside, a Porsche Panamera seized on the spot. Inside the flat, devices everywhere. Encrypted encrophones, laptops, tablets, standard smartphones. All taken, all potentially riddled with secrets. But that wasn't even the worst of what they found, because the digital discoveries they uncovered turned the stomach. On a recovered camera, investigators found photographs, not of holidays, not of family, images of bricks of high-purity coke, shots that looked like they had been taken inside a clandestine lab. On a phone, a video clip, an industrial press compressing coke into transport-ready blocks. On another device, a photograph of a handwritten narco ledger, a debt book. Some entries reached 6 figures, numbers that spoke not of petty dealing, but industrial-scale trafficking. The trail of the vault keys led investigators deeper. 3 private deposit boxes opened under police warrant. Inside, roughly £1 million in cash. Bundles of sterling, euros, and other currencies stacked in secret. Back at the flat, officers uncovered 11 professional-grade money-counting machines. No business could justify them. Only a coke empire moving oceans of cash. And there was more. Bags of ketamine, ecstasy pills, the arsenal of his hedonistic nights. Encrypted iron key USB sticks, unbreakable without his password, which he refused to give. Property deeds and financial records, confirming a real estate portfolio worth around £5 million. Artworks hanging on the walls, originals by Banksy and Warhol, later identified as stolen or purchased with laundered money. Even the tools of production weren't absent. In a garage, 2 massive 30-ton hydraulic jacks, components of the coke presses. Beside them, large containers of acetone solvent. The chemical smell of controlled substances processing lingered in the air. All told, the Bowden raids and linked searches netted £1.2 million in cash, another £1.3 to £1.5 million in cryptocurrency, and a portfolio of assets that screamed criminal wealth. But beyond the figures, it was the texture of the scene that struck investigators. The mingling of wealth, narcotics, and paranoia. The smashed phones in the toilet. The desperate commands to his girlfriend. The evidence layered like strata. Financial ledgers, narcotics, art, solvents, weapons of chemistry. Detective Sergeant Lucy Pearson would later sum it up with chilling clarity. The extent of Sheibani's criminality should not be underestimated. That morning, in Bowden, the mask had slipped, and behind it lay a world darker than anyone had dared imagine. The raid had shattered the illusion. Luxury flats stripped bare, safes cracked open, encrypted phones bent in half and drowned in toilets. But in many ways Sheibani's real reckoning was only just beginning. For nearly 2 years, prosecutors sifted through his empire's wreckage. Suitcases of cash, forged paperwork, encrypted chats dragged back from the digital grave, and a financial trail so convoluted it seemed designed to vanish. All of it funneled into one room, Courtroom 1 at Manchester Crown Court. Spring 2021. The trial begins. 10 long weeks. A public unmasking. Sheibani, the so-called property tycoon, now sitting just feet from the jury, dressed in a suit that couldn't disguise the shackles beneath. He pleaded not guilty to everything, every forged mortgage, every laundered pound, every brick of coke, every encrypted phone flushed in panic. Nearly 20 separate counts were read aloud, the list unfurling like a catalogue of modern organised crime. Conspiracy to supply coke, fraud, money laundering, forgery, possession of criminal property, perverting the course of justice, even refusing to hand over encryption passwords, each charge chiselling away at his carefully manufactured persona. The prosecution moved methodically, like surgeons exposing rot. Financial analysts showed how more than £3 million had slipped through his accounts, unexplained and undeclared. Jurors saw fake payslips and bank statements, some bearing balances of £250,000, files traced directly to his own laptop. Border Force officers recalled seizing tens of thousands of euros from him years earlier, proof of a pattern stretching back a decade. Then came the narcotics evidence, photos of bricks of coke, a how-to video of a press squeezing powder into blocks, a ledger where debts ran into 6 figures. International investigators testified about his Swiss account. €2 million in, gone days later, and lavish Dubai spending sprees. But perhaps most damning was the lifestyle itself. The Bentleys, the hair transplants, the Banksies on his wall, extravagance that could never be squared with the income he declared to HMRC. The message was simple. Only narco money could fund this life. And then the twist. Against every lawyer's advice, Sheibani took the stand. Despite the machinery, the cash, the encrypted phones, he insists he's not a dealer. He admits to being a user, telling investigators, "I am a heavy drug user, but definitely not a drug dealer." When allegations of narco-fueled gatherings at his Kensington flat are raised, he deflects again. "I sometimes take drugs and I sometimes have sex. I don't host chemsex parties," he quips from the stand. A dismissive line meant to downplay evidence of multi-day narco binges. He frames his wealth as a mixture of inheritance, property development, watch sales, and currency trading. In court, he doubles down, claiming his lifestyle comes from Iranian family wealth and profitable investments. The denials persist to the end. The image of a legitimate businessman, crypto investor, property baron, repeated in statements, pressed in testimony. He blamed accountants for the forged documents. He dismissed incriminating videos and debt listings as things sent by others. He denied the sex and coke parties, denied being the man the evidence painted him to be. But the record tells another story. Industrial presses, packaging machines, 11 money counters, millions in cryptocurrency, silent journeys to Colombia. The mountain of evidence strips away the performance and reveals the empire built beneath. Emails showed him ordering edits to fake bank statements. Photographs tied him to narco shipments. Witnesses dismantled his excuses. Piece by piece, the jury saw through the façade. After 10 weeks of testimony, it took them just 5 hours to reach a verdict. In June 2021, Aram Sheibani, self-styled millionaire, international playboy, the man who once told his girlfriend, "Don't tell them anything," stood in the dock as the words fell like a hammer. Guilty on all 20 counts. The kingpin had finally been unmasked. June the 10th, 2021. The courtroom is silent, heavy with expectation. 10 weeks of testimony, 2 years of investigation, a decade of deceit, all of it now funneling into a single moment. Sheibani stands in the dock, a defiant mask fixed in place. Across from him, Judge Anthony Cross, QC, leans forward, voice cutting through the still air. "This city," he begins, "is plagued by death and violence and crime as a result of people like him. Your greed knows no boundaries." He describes a scheming criminal who believed himself untouchable, a man who lied, forged, corrupted systems with a single aim, self-enrichment. He reminds the court that Sheibani was not some peripheral dealer, not a courier caught with a package. He was at the very head, close to the source, a man who dealt not just in supply but in processing, a trafficker whose reach extended all the way back to cartel production lines. The numbers fall like a verdict of history. 34 years for the core crimes, 3 more added consecutively for defying the court's disclosure order. 37 years in total. Gasps ripple through the public gallery. One of the longest sentences of its kind in modern British criminal history, especially for a case without a murder charge. The message is unmistakable. Even silence, even withheld passwords, will not shield you. At 40 years old, Sheibani blanches. 37 years. The maths is brutal. By the time he is first eligible for release, after serving half, he will be pushing 60. By the time the full term expires, he will be nearing 80. Whatever life of luxury he once flaunted is now a ghost. The judge doesn't stop at the man. He widens his gaze to the city, to the country, to every parent who has buried a child to coke. It's rare that a week goes by without this court dealing with a coke-related murder or gang crime. The sentence is punishment, yes, but also a warning. Outside, GMP detectives echo the same note. "We will find you," says Sergeant Lucy Pearson, "and we will ensure you face the full consequences of your actions." The tycoon who once bought Banksy's, who once jetted to Dubai and paid £31,000 for his hairline, is led away as inmate A6438DH. The Bentley, the penthouses, the parties, all stripped, all gone. What remains is a man in a grey jumpsuit stepping into a prison cell where the walls will not change for decades. The downfall is total. The empire destroyed. But Sheibani's story has one more chapter, because wealth that flows through criminal veins does not vanish overnight. Sheibani lived like a kingpin. Mansions, luxury cars, £1,000,000 art. But every brick of his empire was built on lies, forged documents, and narco money. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. But in the end, greed always leaves a trail. And when investigators followed it, the truth tore his world apart. Today, Sheibani isn't sipping champagne in Dubai or hosting drug-fueled parties. He's inmate A6438DH, trading designer suits for a prison jumpsuit, trading freedom for 37 long years behind bars. His story is more than just a fall from grace. It's proof that no matter how high you climb on lies and crime, the crash will always come. And when it does, it's brutal.